Just feel like yeah. You should give her another 2 minutes.
Yeah, definitely. How are you doing? My dad.
Okay, so you accept you want.
You've been way over.
No, Emily.
It's pretty much picked the house. That's okay. You picked a good option.
Yeah, they have French podcast. Yeah, I need another grape for the ring sorts. Give me another Blood Money. Or give me that. Do they have other shiners? I'll take a ruby red. Okay, friends.
So it's kind of
Girl, I got squad get here.
yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's
I went for it.
Thank you. Great. I was like, no. Yeah. Am I reading? I graduated in a year. Thanks, everybody.
I got a lot of family.
Hi.
I'm sure I probably.
Oh, great. Good.
Seems
If she's one of those
No, but can you see me now?
sure if I try to.
You can't. You should be. It's live streaming.
Yeah.
I think you're just not. I think you're on a time lag. That's all.
Then discovered that I was terrible. It's a nice
It's all wireless connection. So. Okay. Okay. Well, so you're on like a 10 delay. That's all. All right. Well, I'll call you later. Thank you. Do you have audio? Yes. Yeah.
Anything fun when you went back last night or? Not really. Yesterday, did a lot.
Anything else where like and
Massive.
I was like, I don't know. I think it's a big convincing. Yeah. So it is. Yeah. So you don't want to take. Yeah, everybody seems very. Oh, we're gonna graduate.
Okay. Jeff.
Yay!
There's definitely.
Is she not ready at all? Right.
There it is. Unofficially the largest presentation ever.
Well, Andy's ruining it. He's like, I should have dressed up more. I'm like, it's just Andy.
Oh, whatever. You look fabulous. You look outstanding. Like, truly stellar.
That's high though. That's high though.
Look at that eyeshadow. I think we're tied. I think it's like eyeshadow versus
Well, that was
Yeah, wow.
Different.
Now, granted, that is poetry.
That's poetry.
Yeah.
I mean, I messed up because my grandma would watch the other one.
Yeah, it's I went to my Chromebook and I bought that microphone.
They're paying them.
Yeah.
I definitely in the future. I think I need to exhibit more.
All you need is
Probably gonna hide it rather than show it.
And I didn't even have to, but I wanted to.
Definitely. I mean, that's
But I could rely
why
on
you.
No, honestly.
So, but
it's always recorded there.
Well,
It's they do everything for you.
whether it gets published or not, you will always be able to read this.
Yeah.
Well,
We'll see how it goes.
I'm sure that there's still.
It's like my mom. It's not about a 20-second video quality is not as great as
I ordered that just based on its name. And now I'm excited.
Yeah, you ordered, yeah.
I can add it.
You want to
I
add?
think I'm
How do you
saying
want
it.
to do it?
Because I'm,
Yeah.
I realized it later that.
Yeah, I'm reading yours, so I'll just say that at the end and then, yeah. Chat's coming up.
Two of those and I have it laid out.
Yeah.
Sit over there, they're all so big.
That's gonna happen at the exact same time.
Hey.
Or at least nothing. I'm not aware of that.
People don't have. They can sell them by
Because they have
Hi.
Just one a day for the next week.
Thank you all so much for coming. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. We're still waiting on one of our readers and for some more people to shelter in, but thanks for coming. We'll be right back to you shortly. Oh, yes?
Yeah. I have to give it to my life. You want to buy it? Maybe later.
Yeah, I figured I'd, cut out.
Nice. I mean, I want to give you, but you seem eager to buy it. Yeah, but I don't need a lot. Yeah.
Thank you. No. I know, that's what I just announced. I just said we're not going to second smash
And so I was like, oh, because I saw him. I was walking up the light sidewalk. I saw them.
They're also
Cool.
figure it out. My mom couldn't figure out how to find it on my
Steel
Facebook
magnolias
page.
too. Even steelier.
Very
Even feeling.
That's what
I would understand. I would understand, but they don't.
You're missing on a
And a bagel.
Yeah, steel magnolias too.
Like,
Yeah.
That might be
I wish I had seen more. You know what I mean? Because I wish I had felt the vibe sooner.
No, my dad.
I don't nothing about him. Yeah, I don't know well enough.
Horrible
And I'm not even gonna tell you.
Frankie all the time. Yes, does not want to be part of the house. It's like
Did you not want But we should have.
Then it turns out I wasn't really
Writing the whole much.
It's like,
where were they?
Language. Yeah, exactly.
but yeah.
We'll chat it out. Hey, that's how we met. Oh, we haven't met. What's your number? Oh, he's a
Yeah, I love
Right,
You gotta go first.
You know, but I also don't because that last, like, especially for the sake of that good, for the sake of like, somehow, and also somehow, like, I feel like just throw in like some other, whatever, throw it all in. I feel like those things kind of go have weird ideas.
Hey, you're gonna go first?
Not always. Well, we don't live. We live on the edge, but seriously, we didn't know that.
So I called. Yeah.
Roughly 10 minutes.
Oh, I was amazing. You should ask what for you. And I didn't recognize her. I looked like 4 days. And then I didn't know.
No. I'm really excited. I'm really excited. Reading all new stuff I've got.
It gets really
No one. Nope. Not Jenny. Jenny would have been try that.
I saw you drive.
I missed you.
Yeah, I saw you.
Say, how did you?
Like just a minute ago, and I did like 3 double takes. I was like, please,
Okay.
How did you get that?
The streaming? Well, the sounds they just do it for you.
glad it was you, and not the other person that was double taking that. Like,
Yeah, but even if you don't, like they knew we wanted it, and then when I got here, it wasn't set up, and they said, okay, they plug it out. Yeah, no problem. I got early. Yeah, I got here early, and they just got the lamps and the soundboard and all that. It only took him 10 minutes.
That's fine.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
even mine.
The streaming thing is just easier. The live streaming is the thing.
Oh, you are.
Yeah, yeah. Andy's grandma's watching.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I days I've been like, my mother's like, yeah. Family, practicing. Okay, so but I'm like,
It's not gonna happen.
Yeah, I'm growing
Yeah.
now, but it's underneath this.
10 minutes.
Getting long enough that
Yes, we'll see how well or ill he is.
yeah, she's
Really nice.
Oh yeah.
I think for a few years, just because the house, similar this year.
I really love what you guys are doing. It was a great night.
I'm either, if my hair's not long enough, really.
Yeah, we're about to like 2 weeks.
Yeah, no, but
Yeah. Yes.
Another friend of mine's getting married next spring. Like, I don't want to like cut it all before all these products out. Like I kind of, because then I'll just be awkwardly growing it out during somebody's wedding. So I'm just gonna let it keep going. I'm trying to stay positive about it though, because real estate back, I mean, I felt like that more, and it was buzzed down like almost to my scalp last July, I think. So it is for me, yeah. So right now, like it's all about,
Yeah.
You could be like, all right, just get out at the
Or it gets to garage sale slash.
I guess like, not really. So, one of those important obligation things. I don't know, of course, but it's his Saturday. You know, like I have today and gone by late July. And his friend is visiting from Rockwall. So I know her question. Yeah, she reposted, like I tagged her and she reposted a picture of mine on Instagram with some other people's and made a little collage. So I'm like, I don't know, if she saw me with other people's son, she'd be like, you that girl. Yeah, it's so hard to pick one. I love like all of them. It's like they're the kind of thing where it's like they're a little bit expensive, so you really have to just like choose wisely.
No, so like I
or it's like that's like I would spend $37 on this. But this is like I wear it all the time. I do. I wear it all the time, and I appreciate. I'm like, I will pay that much money for something, knowing like, I would pay money for like the house that I really like. Because it's handmade, you know, and I know she makes food and she does all the work. But I'm also like, I have to sit there and speak on it for like an hour because I'm like, all right, I'm only going to work one. I just don't care on that thing. Like every time I wear a shirt, like
Did you know for it?
it's like it looks like
Every once in a while when you feel like you're
We're gonna get started, guys.
well, yeah.
Yes.
It's like
Hello, can everyone hear us?
Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you for your patience as we get started tonight. Welcome to the final ALR Graduate Student Reading Series event of the year. It's our graduating students reading, so we're very excited to be bringing 6 fantastic readers to you tonight. We're going to do 3 readers, have a short intermission, and then read more. I want to thank the White House, if you're listening, for having us. It's a really, really lovely venue for the evening. I'm Caitlin Ryder. I'm the managing editor of ALR, and I'm going to give the mic over to my esteemed colleague.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Jenny Holberg, production editor this year. And thanks to everyone for making these 2 years as we were managing production editors so wonderful and coming to our events. It's been really fun.
Okay, so I think we're going to get started. I'm really excited about getting this reading started right now.
I am too, Caitlin. You know, writers nowadays seem to have the most peculiar names.
What do you mean, like funny names?
Right. Tonight, who's on first? What's on second? I don't know what's on third.
Well, no, that's what I was going to ask you. What are the names and the order of our readers tonight?
Who is on first? What is on second? I don't know what's on third.
Well, then, who's reading first?
Who is on first?
No. Mm-mm. No. 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 The person on first.
Who is on first?
The dude. The dude on first.
Ew. I don't think you're hearing me here.
Can you just... Why are you asking me who's on first?
I'm not asking you, I'm telling you. Who is on
No,
first?
no. I'm asking you who is on first.
That's the man's name.
That's whose name?
Yes.
No, think of it this way. Think of it this way. Think of it this way. When the first reader gets paid every month, who gets the money?
Every dollar of it. Why shouldn't he? The man's entitled to it.
Who is?
Yes.
Who does?
Yes. After all, the man earned it.
I'm having some trouble up here figuring out who's going to go first. Who is? Tell me.
Yes. Who is on first?
What's his name?
What is on second?
I'm not asking you who's on second. I'm asking you who's on first.
Yes, exactly.
Look, I'll tell you who's on first. Dr. Andy Briseño. Yes.
Dr. Andy Briseño has been part of the University of North Texas family since the Bush administration. In the many ensuing years, he has collected 2 degrees, a handful of publications, and a great many dear friends. Tonight, he will read from his dissertation, Down and Out, a novel, which holds the unofficial record for the longest dissertation ever submitted to UNT. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Andy Briseño.
All right. Hey, how y'all? Nice to see you once again. I really have been here for fucking forever at this point. It's the truth. And honestly, we were thinking about it. I gave my first reading here something like 7 years ago when it was 2 names ago. Anyways, it's been a long, really fun time, and I want to say thank you to the faculty and to the students and to everybody who's been here all along the way. Yeah, thank you. So, I am going to read from my novel. It's called Down and Out. It's about a small town in Arkansas, one of those places where only one thing happens. In this case, that thing is a factory that makes gears. And in this case, what happens to that one thing is that it closes down, and it's oddly replaced with a reality television show that is there to film exactly what happens when the American dream happens backwards, I guess. And so this is an early chapter in the book. It's hopefully it's supposed to introduce a character, so ideally that should be all you need to know. Yeah. Episode 4. Everything will be all right. Jamie Lynn Mallett was the sort of man who took pride in how few questions he asked. Good news or bad, it was coming either way. He'd worked for the last 13 years in the forge, where we turned raw metal into usable lumps. 6 men per shift tended to and worked in the furnace, rotating in and out in half-hour shifts, it being illegal to work any longer than that. His job was to use a pair of 3-foot tongs to reach into the fire and turn loose the unformed lumps and retrieve the tray he dropped them onto once the metal had melted into the mold provided. The furnace was made of concrete, walls 4.5 feet thick. To reach inside was to bend from the waist and to lean towards 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That kind of heat travels like electricity through everything it touches. It can lick through the creases of the thickest leather gloves and aprons and settle permanently into the folds along the back of your neck. It was a heat that molded the men who served it to its needs. They learned to shave close because the heat can melt your whiskers to your face if you're not careful about how you take your gear off. Their faces took on a flush that never went away, a tan deeper than a tan that in Jamie's case gave life to his cheeks and made his green eyes stand out like Christmas ornaments. Jamie's hair was coarse and black where it hadn't gone to silver early. We didn't know if we could blame the heat for the look across his face, the way he seemed to demand and be granted more space than most men. We wondered this because we knew the heat lingered long after you'd swear it must have slipped away. The tongs Jamie had been using were still hot enough to sear flesh 20 minutes after he'd been laid off from the one job he'd ever had. It was a job that Jamie had inherited, passed down to him from his father, Jim Mallett, who had been the first forge master the factory had ever had and who held the job for some 43 years. Half of us were second and some third-generation employees, but Jamie was the only one to work literally in the shoes his father wore. It begun, as most things did around here in high school. Jamie was a little taller then and walked with a looseness in his step that had never been explained to him. Things had gone well for him from the start. For starters, he wanted for nothing. This was not only because his parents were the only and first two-income family in the history of Chloe's gear, but also because his father was renowned for his willingness and ability to pick up extra shifts. It was largely agreed that if they let him, Jim Mallett would never have stopped working. Jamie carried that looseness with him to high school, where he'd been an above-average athlete with great effort and an average student with none at all. Lettering in baseball and football, been elected the prom queen, and been given a half scholarship to the local university. He arrived on campus that August and was for the first time assaulted by the huge variety the world could offer. He hardly knew what it was that he was supposed to do with himself. Jamie discovered that he enjoyed his classes much more than he would have thought, that they caused him to consider entirely new things. He sat stupefied by the simple beauty of the things he learned about the movement of the soil and the basics of chemistry. He could feel his life begin to accelerate and to widen. The surge of potential that seemed to flow through every day was easier to scoop up. If he'd stopped and thought about it, which was still not a trait he'd acquired, he would have said he was exhilarated and barely able to stand thinking about what might come next. Then what came next came. He was down at the field house lifting weights with the baseball team and trying to explain to one of the catchers what tectonic plates were about when greasy-faced Martin Gossett ran in out of breath with his hands on his knees and said between gasps that Jamie had to call home right away. And before Jamie knew it, he was wearing his father's second nicest suit, staring down at his father wearing the other one. Heart attack, they said. Died right there at the forge. Worked all the way to the end. The most honest and decent of men. God could rest easy now, as Jim Mallett would be around to take care of any overtime. We were so sorry for his loss. Jamie barely heard or saw any of it. Instead, a single memory kept playing through his head. It was the last time a bad storm had blown through town, when Jamie was 13 maybe. Straight-line winds had torn down the valley at 80 miles an hour, along with howling rain and hail the size of golf balls. These were things that happened here. Maybe not often, but often enough that Jim Mallett had dug out a storm shelter in the yard on his days off, lined the sides with concrete, fashioned a door from sheet iron and 6x2s. It was scarcely large enough for him, his wife, their son, but it felt plenty large that night to Jamie. He had watched his father dig the hole, brought him water, and plugged in the radio so we could have something to listen to, had asked and had learned why it was necessary to build such a heavy door, had brought the hose to mix the concrete, done other small accessory work. Young Jamie looked around in the dark, not seeing much, but feeling safe and secure and proud of his part in creating such a feeling. He smiled through the darkness and whispered, "Golly, we're lucky to have this." And out of the darkness, and yet closer than he would have imagined, came his father's voice. "God damn it, son, you brought it on us now." It was probably an hour later, but it felt like right then that Jamie and maybe everybody else for a mile around heard a thundering crack that rose above the howl of the wind. It was a pine tree, and not a small one. The wind had liberated several of them and shot-put them into or through whatever happened to be nearby. When they climbed out of the shelter, the house seemed fine from the back, was fine from the back, and Jamie was foolish enough to think that his father might have been wrong. But when they opened the door, they found the roots in the trunk where the living room ought to have been. It had smashed out every window on that side of the house and caved in that half of the roof line. Mrs. Mallett had a collection of precious moments figurines that had since been rendered into a pile of shards and remnants, with parts of faces and limbs and the heads of animals sometimes still whole. The living room furniture was all relatively intact given the water damage, just shoved well out of the way into the kitchen and the hall and the wall that used to separate the two, like the tree had politely cleared a space to lie it down before it fell through the roof and then the floor. Mrs. Mallett couldn't bring herself to talk, just worked her jaw in a little circle and looked from pile to pile. Young Jamie saw everything, and then saw the road through the hole the tree made, and people slowing down to look at what all the storm had done, looking at where the Mallett's living room ought to have been, looking right in at Jamie. That's when he started to cry, not even making much noise. Up till then, Jim Mallett hadn't done or said a thing. Since he'd shut the boy up, he hadn't even breathed through his mouth, let alone spoke. He had followed the boy and his wife into the house, almost certain of what they'd find there. But when he saw tears running down his son's face, he lost his temper and hauled off and slapped him backhanded. Jamie was shocked silent, even though he wanted to cry even more now, but he was afraid to. He looked at his father, unsure exactly what it was he was allowed to do. Jim Mallett looked down at his son, and maybe he saw the fear in his eyes and took pity, or maybe he just said what was on his mind, or maybe he was just talking to himself, or maybe, and this is what Jamie wanted to think now, he was explaining a few things. He said, "Everything will be all right, because all right's how we'll call what it'll be." Jamie didn't know what he meant then, and he didn't know at the funeral, but he found out shortly after. It started when the factory foreman at the time, a quiet man named Mr. Bates, came up to Jamie when they were standing around eating after, and said that while normally they'd promote from within, that it had been settled that Jamie could take on his father's job and start as soon as he had things settled. Bates didn't ask him if he wanted the job or even imply that there was a question. He addressed Jamie as he would any other employee. At first, Jamie was almost offended, angry enough to fight the man and the presumption at the goddamn nerve, and not an hour after they laid his father to rest. But he tucked that away as well and said nothing, and nodded, and shook the man's hand, and wondered if he did actually have a say in the matter. It turned out he didn't. His mother made it clear that his father's income was the half of his tuition not covered by the scholarship, along with the pocket money and the clothes and the everything. She could keep the roof over her head, she was fairly certain, especially with the insurance policy, but he was on his own. He was just 19 and thought for the first time in quite some time that he was lucky in that he had an opportunity. He reported for his first shift at 7 a.m. bright and early the Monday after they'd buried his father. He spent an hour filling out paperwork, an hour getting his job explained to him, and had started doing the work his father had done his entire adult life at just before 9 in the morning. By 10, he was ready to run. He asked for a bathroom break and was granted one after being told his father had never once made such a request. Once away, he threw off the protective clothing he'd found in his locker, the leather and the Nomex and the thick-soled steel-toed boots. No one had told him that he would be throwing himself into a fire hotter than anything had a right to be. No one told him about the way the heat pried its way right into you, shot through like a bullet, left a hole that kept your guts feeling cooked even still, the air coming out of Jamie's lungs so much hotter than the air coming in. His only thoughts were to find coolness, to find the tallest cliff over the deepest spring-fed pool and to dive deep until the water was cold enough to soak the heat away, and be damned if he never came up for air. He was already leaving the break room with its bare tan walls and scuffed tables and multitude of microwaves, already out the door, on his way to he barely knew where. But every step grew heavy, and then he wasn't moving at all, just standing and thinking about what he was really doing. He could go, right out the door and past them all, let them say what they would, could find that cliff and could jump into that pool. But there would always be a tomorrow, and there would always be a need to keep going. He knew right then that there was only one real way he could go, that being back to the furnace, and it was then that he met his father man to man. Jamie had assumed his father enjoyed his work in some way or another, that he must have as often as he spent at it. But 2 hours in his apron, and Jamie knew for certain that couldn't have been the case. Breathing in the fire, sweat leaking out the eyelets in your work boots, hissing when it hits the floor, it was a thing that couldn't be loved, that could yield no satisfaction beyond its end. Jim Mallett must have felt the same urge to run, the same deep animal requirement to move away and fast, must have felt it every moment of every day, and yet he held that ground and came back for extra as often as they would have it. Jamie couldn't fathom the depth of will such a thing would take, and he was certain he could never be the man his father was. It was the first time Jamie knew all the way through that he would die. It took not 5 minutes from start to finish for Jamie to realize all that, and that left plenty of time for him to summon enough fortitude to go back to his father's job. Knowing what he knew didn't help him stomach it, made it not 1 degree cooler. But he gave him a thing to think about as he worked, and he did so and tried hard to keep his chin level. In only a short period of time, men who had known his father well began to nod their silent approval. All of us pleased at the way he'd managed to fill Jim's welding glove so admirably. Jamie said little from then on, took on a scowl that never seemed to lift, but he was polite enough and a hard worker, and so we nodded at him when we drove by all the same. He kept largely to himself, but went hunting and fishing with Lyle Yance on weekends. He was not often seen in church or the bar, but was welcome enough in both places. When the factory died and the show began, Jamie volunteered to be the last one driven home. He sat in the break room patiently, asked no questions, and answered shortly when ones were asked to him. When the camera was finally mounted in the front seat of his truck, the production assistant crammed into the jump seat behind him and the camera started rolling. The assistant asked him the first question on his list. "What do you think you'll do now?" Jamie found himself quoting his father, and in so doing gave the show its first great soundbite. "Things will be all right, because all right's what we'll call how it'll be." It became not only part of the opening montage and the first bump, but a sort of recurring theme. They would play the clip over the end of anything we tried and failed at. They would show it as Jamie's truck faded into the background as an ending to episodes 4, 9, and 13. He only said it the one time, but like several things, it tended to take on more meaning than it might have intended. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. I forgot to mention that we are very fortunate to be live streaming this event right now on Google Hangouts. So hello to friends and family members that are watching in other cities. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our next reader, Jenny Molberg. Jenny Molberg won the Berkshire Prize for her debut collection of poetry, Marvels of the Invisible, forthcoming from Tupelo Press. Her poems have appeared or are forthcoming in North American Review, Copper Nickel, Third Coast, Mississippi Review, The Adroit Journal, and elsewhere. Currently, she is production editor at the American Literary Review and will graduate this month with her doctorate from UNT. This fall, she will begin her new position as assistant professor of English at the University of Central Missouri. Again, I'm really excited to introduce my colleague, my best reader, and my best friend, Jenny Molberg.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you all for coming. Okay, so I've never read any of the poems out loud that I'm going to read tonight, so bear with me if I stumble. Okay, so the first poem is about a horse. I don't think I need to say anything else about that. Teepee. Teepee and I were the same age. His eyes, whitish and filmy, tracked me vaguely when I opened and closed the stable door, fed him an apple from my hand. Over one hill, then another we rode until I couldn't hear the voices of the barn or my brother's hammer chipping a geode, hunting arrowheads. Teepee and I were alone in the hills and we were so quiet. The longhorns grazed beside the pond and the deer peered around the bur oaks and the redbuds. When I fell, it was as if I were suspended, reins slipping through my hands like a lost argument. Teepee bucked, the russet ring around his eye like a bruise. Not then, but eventually, both our lives would end, no matter the galls, the drive, how much we fought. Teepee wandered back to the barn, and I, picking burrs from my arms and legs, looking across to the other hill, spattered with Indian paintbrush, knew it was me who had fallen, and not the horse that threw me. Okay, this next poem is sort of a persona poem. I'm thinking about the old Grimm Brothers version of Rumpelstiltskin, where in the end, after the miller's daughter has sort of tricked him at his game, Rumpelstiltskin ends up stamping his feet into the ground so hard that he gets stuck and then rips himself apart. It's pretty gruesome. It's called Sound of the Spinning Wheel. And there's an epigraph, and it reads, "The devil has told you that. The devil has told you that." I wrote, "I cannot say what cannot be said, and I wear that scarf against the wind that blows through me." Born out of loneliness, he comes only with death, the smell of a child's gloomy breath, and the earth crushed under the weight of a body. So I become someone else, my head full of tinnitus and fruit, pitted and undiscerning. I put my ears to the ground until they are planted there, and I begin to hear the ground singing, the dead and their 1,000 dying verses. Only then can I say what I could not say, that there is a hole in me where a worm crawled through. That hole says mother, it says father, it says mother, father, until I rise from my barrenness and tear myself in two. Okay, so as some of my friends here know, I have a ridiculous fear of tornadoes, which begins to become a big problem in spring in Texas. So I have a couple about storms. My sister used to play tornado in the front yard. And I never really participated because that wasn't fun for me. So this poem is called Playing Tornado. The great mouth flicks its cyclone tongue and drinks from me. Rootlet, half-hearted fingers in the plain's dirt. This is how I wanted to go, winded, struck and drunk by sky. I am a staff and the cattle are sea, water wall of black and white, galloping bee. But this never really happens. A furious beauty, my teacher says, looking through the skylight that doesn't break. The great mouth says I'm clairvoyant when I say Pisces. He says this because it's what I want to hear. He says I'll sing, but I am no singer. Remember the game? The hall of towels and dolls and Easter baskets scattered across the lawn like wind-blown limbs. Your arms were propellers, your mouth of fledglings, drinking from the storm's open wormhole. Receiving the greening sky as the needled face of a prickly pear. I stayed inside. I was jinxed. I'd seen a ghost, a girl on the merry-go-round. I was sure she'd seen me. Sure some god would dip his spoon of wind into the living room and take my body and make it his. Take it, I thought. Even worse if he swallowed you or anything I loved. Take me, I thought, when I watched you cross the street. And later, on the tree swing, when the branch creaked, groaned, and in the split second before it fell, I saved only myself. I hate this memory, the wind comes shouting from your lungs, your asking eyes. Later, I wrote my wish and slipped the paper into the rubber neck of a green balloon, then blew. That wish that blows open the heart's airy cavern. No more to lose. This next poem, I was thinking about all the different things that people call sun showers, so I'm sure a lot of us call it the devil beating his wife. And then I learned that some people call it a fox's wedding, it's sort of a Japanese thing, and then others call it a wolf giving birth. The other thing I was thinking about is just this recent experience of sitting next to an old friend who had had a stroke. So this is called Portrait of Devil Beating Wife. I hate the forecast, readying the car for my grandmother's 80th birthday lunch. The sun is a crystal cutting through cloud and the rain's metronomic hands like a wizened piano teacher's wrapped the sky's beat. In New Mexico, a sun shower is a wolf giving birth, our star some overripe moon, wet strove of pain and pleasure and new life. Others call it a fox's wedding. Is it possible to disappear fear? The furry trickster's many-tailed magic ripens with age. He shape-shifts into a bathrobed woman who flings the clouds open as curtains, letting in some light. Poor Persephone, always reminded in spring of the hand that strikes beneath her. When the storm breaks, the awful light casts her shadow, seeping up of what lies below, like the woman I sit next to at lunch. The dull lightning of her thrombotic brain, her tongue dumb against her teeth as she asks, my teaching? I offer, one hand on her shoulder, the other mimicking a question. I spill my iced tea across the table and she thanks me with her eyes. Forget feeble-mindedness, forget the mind's dark winter, forget the tea-soaked tablecloth. She has forgotten nothing and how badly she wants to say it, thinking of her newly married granddaughter and the other one who is sick. The waiter brings bowls of peach bisque, and with her fist she wraps my leg to help me help her speak. But outside, the storm has begun, and when the chef comes to tell the way he spiced the peaches, she has given up. Something resembling peace in her face, cinnamon, clove, anise, the rain falling. Okay, I'm just going to read one more. In fact, I'll be headed to Missouri soon. This is my ode to Texas. It's called Invocation. Praise my coronary artery, the Red River, and passing it through the country of my heart, the Vena Cava, which is the Rio Grande. Praise the trench coats, the umbrella bones, what looking out stirs inside. Patches of wildflower that streak the Texas highway, enchanted rock, and the Brazos, God's river arms. Praise its prison songs that sing low like grandfathers. My spleen, gallbladder, and stomach, immigrant hills, my great-grandparents' cross. My capillaries, the feathers Oma wore in her hair. Praise the white-tailed fawn we found dead a day, its neck caught between bars, and praise my father's stethoscope that always hears what beats. Praise the Great Plains, the geode caves, arrowheads carved from bone. Praise my bronchial pathways, breathing their 1,000 branches, the bluebonnet, and baby blue, the old Ford pickup. Praise this land, its 2 hills, the house my parents planned to build. What the flood will take from us, and what will remain. Praise the elk heads on basement walls, those lords, those specters of my family, cast like daguerreotypes in each marble eye. Thank you. So it is my great pleasure to introduce April Murphy. April Jo Murphy is a doctoral candidate in creative writing at the University of North Texas, set to graduate in August. Her essays, short stories, and poetry have been published in Sinister Wisdom, Women's Studies Quarterly, and Hippocampus Magazine, among other journals. April Jo is also the author of the college writing textbook Beyond Normal, How to Make Your Writing Devilishly Good, currently in use by the State University of New York at Fredonia. Her academic writing most recently appears in Heroines of Comics and Film, and April Jo has been an editorial consultant for several publications ranging from American Literary Review to the Encyclopedia Britannica. She lives in Denton with her large hound dog, Rowan. Please join me in welcoming April.
Hello. I'm going to read a short essay that's from my dissertation. I hope you like it. So this is called Requiem for a Mole. I am ending the day with less of my body. This sort of thing happens. The body is finite. A small piece of flesh on my right thigh, just beneath the hemline of my shorts. A tiny mound of brown. A mole. Gone. Nobody but me will miss it. Nobody else even knew it was there. My body is a vast white sky dotted with flecks of brown. As if when I was being formed, somebody sprinkled some extra spices in. There were more than I can count, but I have my favorites. On my long middle toe, there's a warm chocolate dot. It peeks at me in summer months when my shoes open out into the world. On my left ring finger, a pale beige shadow that would sit squarely under the rock of an engagement ring. It reminds me that I'm wed to myself always first. Between my breasts, a tender speck of dark coffee only tasted by lover's lips. My markings, my body, are a language that only I can read. When I learned that the southern hemisphere had different constellations than the northern, it felt as if the earth shook beneath my feet. To imagine looking up at the night and not seeing familiar figures, Cassiopeia on her upside-down throne, the three bright lights of Orion's camps, to not see the tapestry of stories I learned as a girl, but instead be humbled by a vast, utterly different lightness, so alien and unrecognizable. The very thought makes me feel small, lost. It is so easy to forget that we are just specks from a larger body ourselves. The wounds on my leg will heal. The skin will grow back a starker white. The recurring scar will be the ghost of the mole that was there before. Then that specter will fade too. This marking, the small mound of brown that dotted my leg all my life, will only exist in my memory. This is the second time I've had such a procedure. The first removal nearly a decade ago was a large smudge on the right border of my face, on the last delicate curve of chin beneath my ear. It was the kind of marking some would call a birthmark, or if you were my mother, a beauty mark, and it was large enough for others to see. At least once or twice a year, a well-meaning stranger would come up to me and say, "Excuse me," always reaching at me to wipe the blemish away. "You have some chocolate on your face." It was embarrassing and ugly, and I did not like it. The first girl I loved had a sense of humor. In the dark, when she traced her fingertips over the ridge on my chin, I told her about my eternal struggle with strangers who mistook my skin for sloppiness. Between the kisses I stole on the bottom bunk of her belt, I would have given her anything. She took the idea and ran with it. For weeks afterward, as I took my seat in Mr. Leduc's 8th period American government class, she would lean into the space between us and whisper, "Excuse me, miss. Excuse me, ma'am." My face turned redder and redder the louder she got. "It appears you have some leftover chocolate on your face." When I couldn't take it anymore, or it seemed that Mr. Leduc was perilously close to noticing a commotion, I broke hand taps at her. She was beautiful. She had dark brown hair that flowed down her back, greenish eyes and little fireworks of freckles on her face and neck. I longed to press my lips to each of them and learn what our special breed of love tasted like. God, she was beautiful and funny, and I was not the only one who noticed. She was more popular than me, and in our high school we traveled different social orbits. But at night, she was mine. I felt so lucky to have found her and so proud. Sorry to face that word. I wanted everyone to know it was young and strong and foolish. But she didn't. Our secret sleepover tenderness was something she was afraid of. It would expose too much. When I asked her to be my girlfriend in the daylight, she said no. A decade later, I understand. We were the only girls who liked other girls that either of us had ever met in our chilly northern town. It would have been insane to be out. We did not live in a world where we could be together. But I didn't understand then. When she said no, I thought she was ashamed of me. Because I was unpopular, because I was ugly, because I had a face that people thought was a mistake. I wish I could say I took a high road, but I was a 17-year-old girl. I hid in plain sight. I started dating a boy from a neighboring town and hid my big, gay, blotchy face under his, especially when she was around. Around this time, my Nana, who had spent some time with dermatologists, decided that the beauty mark was a sign of future melanoma, and each day it remained on my face was reckless. It needed to go. But sometimes we only love ourselves when someone else sees the light through our cracks. The world may not have known that my lady brushed her lips against mine in the dark, but my mole was there. It had felt her secret tenderness. I refused, telling Nana that my twin brother had a nearly identical mark on his neck. My mother, too. She'd never pestered any of them about it. I suspect my refusal only increased her desires. She needed to save face by changing mine. Graduation was approaching, and Nana put her foot down. If I didn't do anything about that cancer spot, then she would have nothing to do with me. Not only would she not come to the ceremony, but she threatened to sever my little branch of the family tree forever if all I was going to do was stand back and let it wither. The procedure was quick, painless. The doctor numbed the whole right side of my face and cut into me while I sat wide-eyed, drooling. It was a strange feeling being dull to the pain, but still feeling every tear in my flesh, the pressure of the blade as it dug deeper and deeper and down. After it was done, I marveled at the piece of me floating in the biopsy container. The mole was much larger than could have been seen from the surface. It was a floating volcanic island, a thing that had roots deeper in me than I had ever known. I asked the doctor if I could keep it. He laughed, made some joke. Certainly not. What could I have said? That I had vague plans of giving it to the girl who spurns me? That it was easy to give someone your metaphorical heart, but to give someone a literal piece of you is realer and truer a declaration of love than any poetic flourish? See, I can imagine myself saying, how deep your touch goes. In the end, the girl I loved gave the mark back to me. It was on the last days, when we were all waiting for ceremony because the big choices had been made. Colleges and prom dates were chosen, the future looming over us like an alien sky full of characters we hadn't learned to recognize yet, giving us only the light of our hopes to navigate the murky dark. She leaned over, traversing the space between our desks, and slipped me a note. Inside there was a poem written in a splotchy circle, the words cramped and circling each other, chocolate, sweetness, until they formed the beauty that was now only stitches on my skin. I had never believed that love is a finite resource, that we can only give ourselves away, piece by piece. That if those we give ourselves to discard us, we are somehow less than we were before. Instead, I believe that our loves guide us. We learn to recognize the stars in each other's eyes, how to understand the ebbs and flows of our tides until one day we found solid ground. Tonight, as I tend the hole in my thigh, I'm grateful. My body is a map full of constellations I'm still learning to read, but between the scars, marks, and ink, I know it will eventually lead me home.
Thank you, April. Okay, we're going to take a brief break of about 10 minutes, and then we'll be back with some more fantastic writing for you. Thank you.
Is there a way that I can log into it and listen to it?
Yeah, there's a link. Go to Facebook. On the event page, there's a link, like a bit.ly link. Yeah.
No, I think it's because I wasn't.
Oh, upcoming videos too.
I wasn't invited. I swear it was not. You're right.
Dude. Anyway, so nearby events. Yes. Actually, it should be. Yeah, there. At this. And then here. So, but I don't know how it works on your phone. It looks like it's not going to do it for you. There's no like play. I think you have to have it has to be like. I have my glasses here. Yeah, this looks weird. Yeah, it's like hangout. It's like a hangout on it. This has got to be good. But it's not quite. It's like a hangout on here. Anyway, I'm gonna try it anyway. But do you think the I got the gain on like 40%. Do
At this point.
you think the gain of like less than half is gonna be good? Because like you can turn the volume down on your computer if you're watching. It's gotta be it's case sensitive. Well, no, sorry, one capital. Yes, it's like that. You gotta turn the volume. I'll fix it. But it still should be. It also. Oh yeah. Volume on this. No, the volume. Wouldn't have that
So, and everything below here beautiful. Weird.
Thank you for trying it. I mean, I know it's working out a lot. It's great. It's always great. You're right.
This guy is a real person.
Story.
We're going to get started again in a minute. If you want to make your way back to your seats, if you're inside, come join us. Just about one more minute, we'll get started.
Yes, I'm sure such a grad school. Oh, you're just using the
I have an agenda.
Oh, yeah?
I love that you and Nick.
It'll help me work it out.
Yeah, we were both up so late, and I was like, I mean, I didn't eat it.
What's it called?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time for some more excellent writing to be read. If you're ready, I'm ready. Are you ready? No? No, not over here? Okay. Okay, if we are ready, I would really like to introduce our next reader, Matthew Davis. Matthew Davis received an MFA from Boston University and is currently a Toulouse Dissertation Fellow at the University of North Texas. He has published scholarship on Philip Roth and James Joyce. His fiction has appeared in Connu and the Master's Review. Let's give a round of applause for Matthew.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out, everybody, tonight. Thanks to the internet for tuning in. I'm going to read part of the novel that I submitted for my dissertation. And I'm reading from a part that's early on, and there's not a lot of information that you need to know ahead of time, but one thing you do need to know about the main character. Her name is Coda. She moves to Florida with her husband after she gets pregnant in college. And he gets hired as a mortgage broker there. This is back during the housing boom, maybe 10 years ago. And at a certain point, they decide that they're going to cash in on this boom by taking out a bunch of NINA loans, which are no income, no asset loans, which means they can borrow, or they do borrow in the novel, like $1.5 million to buy houses to flip, to try to speculate. And of course, they buy exactly the wrong time and they lose everything. So that's sort of set up for the beginning of this section. So she's sort of lost everything at this point in the book. Coda was on the beach, less than 100 yards from her back door. The sun was rising out of the Atlantic. Standing just far enough out that the foamy edge of the tide could wash over her feet, she burrowed into the wet sand with her toes, drew the fluttering end of her robe tight around her body. Coda had just spent the last night in the condo she convinced her husband to rent after he was hired as a mortgage broker, then convinced him to keep 4 years later after he was fired, assuring Virgil it was only a temporary matter, that the market would rebound and they would soon be made whole again. But she had been wrong. Now Virgil was gone and she was out of money. With nowhere else to turn, Coda had boxed up the kitchen and the room her son shared, the furniture except for her king-size bed and the bassinet she left behind. When everything was ready, she went down the street knocking on doors, introducing herself to neighbors she had never met, asking for help, until she met a man from Oklahoma, like her, a retiree who volunteered his truck. And now the day had come. She'd risen at the first sign of light and gone out her back door to watch the sun rise from the ocean, unaware that it was the last time she would set foot on a beach in Florida. The old man drove. Ethan, her oldest son, sat between them, and Charlie, her youngest, rode on her lap across the bridge from the barrier island to the mainland. The streets of Melbourne were thick with foot traffic, summer tourists looking for a place to buy t-shirts and shot glasses, a place to get drunk before noon, a bathroom for their squirming child. Further inland, they passed the mall and Cineplex and Country Club, then turned north, headed for the housing developments around Lake Washington. They passed the entrance to Flora Fauna Estates, the Willows, Chestnut Run. They continued until they arrived at Woodshire Reserve, a gated community on the front line of Melbourne's western expansion, now abandoned, the gate wrenched loose and left slanting across the road. Streets had been laid in Woodshire Reserve. Fire hydrants had been spaced along the curb, but only 3 houses stood on the 375-acre parcel. A model near the entrance, another that was only a skeleton of 2x4s and plywood, and then the 4,000-square-foot neo-Victorian that Coda and Virgil had bought in the early days of the decline for half of what the builder had spent on construction, convinced that they would double their money in a year. The house was at the end of a cul-de-sac, hidden from the entrance by a thicket of flowering jacaranda trees and rainbow eucalyptus planted by the developers and since invaded by palmettos. Standing at the end of her driveway, Coda could see nothing between her and the tree line but waist-high grass. "You're sure you'll be comfortable out here alone?" the old man asked before lowering the tailgate of his truck. "I grew up in the country," Coda answered. "I'll be fine." And for a time she was. After they unpacked, she helped Ethan set up an obstacle course of cardboard boxes, then raced him from one end of the living room to the other in her sock feet, sliding on the hardwood floor, laughing when she slipped, flattening one of the boxes against the wall. The next afternoon, Coda followed her son out to the man-made pond that touched the northern edge of their lot. Wading through the tall grass, Charlie strapped to her chest. It did not occur to Coda then that there was any danger in letting Ethan run ahead, and letting him swim in the murky water while she stood in the shallows. She was at ease in those first days. It was as though she were back in Oklahoma, chasing her brother through the acres of hayfields that grew behind her parents' house, or swimming the river that marked the boundary of her father's pecan orchard in water turned the color of rust by the soil, her father and his chest waders downstream in case the current caught one of them. Then, at the end of their third day in the house, Coda went to check the front door before she climbed the stairs up to the master bedroom, where her boys were already asleep, and glancing out a window that looked out on the cul-de-sac, she saw a pair of yellow eyes glowing in the dark. She rushed out to the porch, clapping her hands and shouting to scare off what she thought was a stray cat, but what was actually a panther that she sent loping across the asphalt for cover, its sandy coat blending into the yellow grass. After that, she forbade Ethan from going outside until she mowed the yard. But Coda did not have money to buy a lawnmower, and so a few days later she loaded her boys up in her sedan and went to see what she could salvage and sell from the 2 other houses that she owned and that had sat empty for months while the banks processed the backlog of foreclosures. To her surprise, the first house had been taken over, the locks changed, the interior cleaned up. There was a realtor's key box hooked around the doorknob. Through the windows, Coda could see that all the work she'd started before Charlie was born had been finished by someone else. She recognized the colors she had picked out on the walls and the dark flooring she had bought to match. The second house, however, remained untouched, and she let herself in. The kitchen appliances were still shrink-wrapped in the living room. Boxes, laminate flooring, and cans of paint were stacked against the wall. The rolled carpet was still in the spot she had abandoned it after dragging the load halfway across the yard. Grass had grown up around the carpet, which was covered in patches by moss that had given root to red flowers. Coda went through the house to collect everything that she could sell, and that was small enough to fit in the back of her car: a chop saw, a microwave still in its box, an uninstalled farmhouse sink that was so heavy she had to set it down halfway up the walk to rest. It was while she was loading the sink into her car that she was approached by Felix. He had been working with a trash-out crew at the house across the street, filling the back of his pickup with molded drywall and water-stained carpet padding. He offered her a bottle of water, commented on the heat, then asked who owned the house she was cleaning out. "I did once," Coda answered, "but not anymore, or at least not for long." "You got somewhere to go?" he asked. Coda took a long drink of water. "We're fine, thanks. My husband's found something temporary," she lied, rather than admit the truth about her situation. "You're lucky," Felix said. "I've seen so many people put on the street recently, I've started to carry these." He showed her a flyer in his hand with information about a local shelter. Is that what you guys are up to, kicking someone out? The people are already gone." He looked back over his shoulder where the 2 men he was working with were sitting in the shade, drinking beer, pretending not to watch them. "It's shit work, but construction is so scarce these days, I can't afford to turn anything down." Coda said, "My husband worked construction for a long time." "Yeah, well, I could use an extra set of hands if he's in the market. The banks have more inventory coming in than I can keep up with." "Actually, my husband's gone back to Texas to look for work," she admitted. Felix said, "That's too bad." "What about me?" Coda asked. "You need an extra set of hands, but are you willing to hire a woman?" Felix smiled. Felix smiled at the interruption by motorcycles. Where was I? Felix smiled, glanced over his shoulder at the men under the tree again. "I can't really afford to bring on any greenhorns. I was renovating houses when the market caved." "Yeah, no, I understand, but this is man's work. That's just the plain truth of it." Coda said, "I'll bet you all the money in my pocket that I'm stronger than the 2 dudes drinking beer in the shade over there." "I'm sorry, it's just," he began, but Coda cut him off. "You don't want me, that's fine. I'm not interested in an apology." She went back in the house, collected the tools left scattered around. When she came out again, Felix had moved behind her car, taken the chop saw from the trunk to inspect the moving parts for rust. Ethan had crept to the edge of the yard to watch him, and Coda sent him back to sit in the shade with his brother on the side of the house. To Felix, she said, "Is there something I can help you with?" "What are you going to do with a tool like this?" he asked. "I guess that's my business, isn't it?" "You looking to sell it?" "Not to you," Coda said. That made Felix laugh. Then he told Coda that he might have some work for her after all. And this was how Coda began her career as a scavenger of foreclosed homes. Felix explained that he'd found all sorts of things left behind in the houses he was paid to clean out. Flat-screen televisions, appliances, even jewelry and cash. But his crew wasn't allowed to keep any of it. What they found was property of the bank, and Felix would lose his contract if he were caught breaking the rule. But if someone were to know, say, where the empty houses were and get there before his crew, they could clean the place out and the banks wouldn't be any wiser. If she was interested, Felix said, he could text her the addresses of the houses he had on his schedule, give her a few days to make her way over there and see what she could find. Easy, risk-free scores that the 2 of them could split down the middle. Coda said she wanted to think about it, but really what choice did she have? She had to pay the outstanding balance on her utility bill to get the water running and lights on at the house in Woodshire Reserve, which left her with just enough to feed herself and her boys for another month. She had to find some way to make money or head back to Oklahoma, so a few days after she met Felix, she drove back out to the barrier island and left her kids with a woman she had befriended on her old street, then headed to the first address that Felix had sent her. She went around to a back door and tapped a long, flathead screwdriver into the crevice between the jamb and the door with a hammer until the tip hit the latch and the door swung open. She wore a respirator over her face at Felix's suggestion, but the house was clean, bright, a little stifling in the humidity, but ready for whoever would move in next. Felix had warned her that she would encounter places like this. The banks were offering cash to people who had stopped paying their mortgages if they would clean up and move out quietly. A few months later, Coda would have known to turn off the water in a house like this and crawl under the cabinet to remove the faucet and sink. She would have known to unhook the gas range and pry it out of the countertop. She would have known to take down the ceiling fans and light fixtures. These were the things that sold most reliably on the internet, not the clothes and small appliances and video game consoles she valued at first. And so, faced with the empty house, she left with nothing. The next address was more typical of what was to come. An odor hung like a curtain in the doorway, something she had to push through, yanking her mask up over her nose. The air was sweet and sour like the smell that rose from her mother's compost pile in the summer, but beneath that was something rancid, something that reminded Coda of the time a possum had fallen from a tree in the yard and crawled into her parents' house to die, filling the room above with the rot of carrion. With each step, water seeped from the carpet beneath her feet. The table in the dining room was covered with bills and unopened mail that had started to disintegrate into pulp. A mold sprouting white hairs like wisps of dandelions grew on the dishes piled in the sink. Coda moved carefully through the house, calling out hello, easing open each door as though she expected to find something grotesque on the other side. Instead, she found only the ordinary debris of modern life. Clothes heaped in piles along the walls, dresser drawers yanked open, sheets thrown back as if the family who lived there had been driven out one morning with only a few minutes to prepare. One small room was decorated with race car wallpaper, another with pink polka dots. Coda could not bring herself to search through the children's rooms that first day. She pocketed some cheap jewelry left behind on a nightstand in the parents' room, and then, in the master bedroom, she found the source of the smell filling the house, the corpse of a small dog on the tile floor. At the sight of this, Coda ran out of the house and back to her car. She drove home with the windows down, sucking in deep gulps of air, and showered before she picked up her boys. But she continued to go back out. She bought herself more gear, thick rubber gloves and blue jumpsuits that zipped up the front. Over the weeks, she began to make money selling power tools and televisions and musical instruments to pawn shops. Quickly, though, she taught herself what was worth taking by scouring ads online, learning what demanded the highest price. She was able to trade her sedan for a truck at a used car dealership, and then she began to pick kitchens clean, rolling out dishwashers and refrigerators, ovens and hot water heaters, sometimes whole sections of cabinets and countertops pried away from the walls. After a few months, Felix came to her with a way to expand their operation. Each house his crew trashed out came with a budget for replacement materials, which meant that Felix had been going to the bathroom wholesaler every day to buy sinks and faucets to replace the ones that Coda had removed. But he said there was no reason that money had to go to someone else when he could just as easily buy back from Coda the very pieces that she had just removed. Again, Coda hesitated. Surely, she said, something like that had to be illegal. Sure, Felix answered. In the strictest sense, they would be graduating from petty theft to fraud, but it would be easy to keep them both safe. To give the operation legitimacy, Coda would print up receipt booklets with a fake company name, an address that didn't exist, and a number linked to a throwaway phone. All the transactions would be cash, untraceable back to her. If anyone did get suspicious, Coda could simply toss her phone in the ocean and walk away. But no one would get suspicious because no one at the bank cared about petty cash. There was so much money flowing into Florida that no one had the time to count it or investigate where it was going. It was as if someone had gone around leaving bags of cash inside the abandoned houses in Melbourne with no intention of ever coming back, and all Coda had to do was go pick it up. And over the next few months, it really was that simple. Coda would go out, pick a house clean, and then haul everything back a few days later, hand it over to Felix for a handful of cash. But the money offered her no relief. She was able to buy clothes for her boys, furniture for the house, a tree and gifts at Christmas, But still, she forced Ethan to sleep in a king-size bed with her, Charlie in his bassinet, close enough that she could reach him without standing up. Spending her days inside other people's houses made her no longer feel safe inside her own. She began to have dreams about men breaking in to steal the things that she had salvaged and left in the garage, or the pillowcase of cash she'd hung from a nail inside the laundry chute in her bathroom. One night she heard the sound of an engine outside while she lay in bed. From the window she watched a truck cruise past the mouth of the cul-de-sac, then circle back and sit idling in front of her house for 10 minutes before pulling away again. The dreams increased after that, and at least once a week Coda would wake convinced that she had heard a noise somewhere below and walk the empty floors of the house in the dark, a .45 automatic pistol in hand. She'd found the gun on an early salvage run, and since then she had never gone anywhere without it. She carried it in a bag slung over her shoulder while she watched Ethan play on the mowed grass behind their house. When she went on a job, she kept it in a holster beneath her jumpsuit. And when she slept, the pistol stayed in a small lockbox stashed beneath the corner of the mattress. In all that time, Coda had only fired the gun once, in a house that she never should have entered. There had been something wrong with the place, something that she could feel as soon as she got out of her truck. The windows had been broken out, covered over with plywood. Someone had spray painted "Stay Out" in tall red letters across the front wall, next to a skull and crossbones. But the back door was open. Coda drew her pistol before she pushed the door open. The interior was dark and the lights did not work. She had to hold a flashlight up next to her gun like she had seen actors do in television as she moved from room to room, checking that the house was clear. Afterwards, she sat on the cool tile of the kitchen floor with her legs crossed and her eyes closed, taking deep breaths to calm her racing heart. Then she went to work. Crawling to the cabinet beneath the sink, flashlight clamped between her teeth, and when she opened the cabinet door, there, not 3 feet from her face, was a coiled python as thick and long as a fire hose. Coda threw herself backwards, slid into the wall, feet pumping uselessly against linoleum. She lunged for the .45 left beside her toolbox and emptied the entire clip into the space beneath the sink. The noise left her ears ringing. She could not hear the snake writhing in pain, but she could see the dark shape of it unspooling onto the tile, knocking the cabinet doors back. And Coda got up and ran from the house. She ran all the way back to her truck with the pistol still in her fist, screaming, a sound that she could feel in her chest but could not hear over the ringing still in her ears. The encounter with the snake was the beginning of the end. After she picked up her boys, Coda stripped down in front of the mirror in her bathroom and examined her body to ensure that she had not caught a piece of shrapnel. Then she lay down for a nap. Ethan woke her up sometime after the sun had set to tell her he was hungry. Coda made a pot of macaroni and cheese, resting her head on the table while she waited for the water to boil, feeling more exhausted than she had at any time since she was pregnant. She laid down early with her boys and slept until late the next morning, waking with a pain spread across the bridge of her nose and a dull ache in her chest. She had been salvaging houses every day for nearly a year, rising at dawn, as she had for most of her life, to get her boys ready for the sitter, staying up until midnight to take care of all the things that needed to be done around the house. But she'd always been able to summon the energy to get up, to work, to do what needed to be done. And then suddenly it was as if the wall of fatigue that she built up day by day collapsed on her all at once. She no longer had the strength to lift herself from the mattress, so she called out to Ethan, who reported that he had fed himself and Charlie cereal while she slept. Coda asked him to bring her 2 of the hard-boiled eggs from the bowl in the refrigerator, then she showed him how to peel them for her. After a day in bed, she managed to return to work, moving much slower, taking breaks every half hour to sit down outside, waiting until the end of the day to load everything into the back of her pickup with the last of her strength. She dragged herself through another month like this. Then one evening she came home and found she had a fever. She told herself it was nothing to worry about, even as her temperature stayed high for a second and third day, even as she felt the first sore in her mouth, each white like a pimple, and so painful that she had to avoid the area when she brushed her teeth. By the 5th day, the sores had appeared along her gums and filled the inside of her lips, on the top and bottom, and dotted her tongue. She was so tired that she could no longer cook. Instead, she lay on the sofa and instructed Ethan on how to light the gas burner, how to heat up canned pasta and soup, how to fry hot dogs in a pan. Every night she promised herself that if she was not better in the morning, she would call her doctor, only to decide in the morning to push off the inevitable for another day. The one person she did call was her husband, but Virgil had changed his number by then, and a man who spoke only Spanish answered instead. On the morning that the sheriff's deputy arrived the trash-out crew to empty the house in Woodshire Reserve, Coda thought in her half-conscious state that the bank had uncovered her scheme and sent the police to arrest her. And still she was relieved. She called out to answer the voice in the vestibule downstairs, which caused so much pain in her mouth that she decided to wait for them to find her. She shook Ethan awake and told him to take his brother out of the bassinet, hand him to her, and then Coda lay back on the mattress with her boys on either side of her, whispering to them that everything would be okay, that they were about to go visit their grandparents while she went away to get better. On the landing, a voice called out, "Anybody home?" "No thanks, we don't want any," Ethan answered, which made Coda laugh, despite everything. The bedroom door opened and there was Felix, saying, "Sorry, man, but we have orders to clear this place out." He did not recognize Coda until she said, "What are you doing here, Felix?" "Shit, girl, you living here?" he said, then added, "I wish I'd known I could have given you a heads up." "No, don't worry," Coda replied. "It was time for me to go anyway." Thank you.
Okay, it is my great pleasure to introduce a poet I really admire and my best friend, Dr. Caitlin Pryor. Caitlin Pryor's poetry is forthcoming or has appeared in Cold Mountain Review, Redivider, Nimrod, the Mississippi Review, Poet Lore Fugue, and elsewhere. She holds an MFA from the New School and a PhD from the University of North Texas, where she is currently a teaching fellow and serves as the managing editor of the American Literary Review. You can learn more about her work at CaitlinPryor.com. Please join me in welcoming Caitlin.
Hello again. Thank you all for coming. Excuse me. I'm going to be reading 4 completely new poems, and I'm excited. I'll just get right into it. This one is called "The Doctor is In." I never bred unicorns, never baked a Tonka truck in my plastic oven. Play approached the real, slim asymptote of what we know. Craft shows, vet offices, psychiatry booths bloomed in our bright front room. I'd seen the Peanuts, Lucy greedily clanging coins in an old tin can, 5 cents for advice. But most of all, it was my father I modeled, who worked late with his patients, all patients, as they teetered on parapets and Percocet. I'd hang a sign from my drawing table, 5-year-old psychologist who, due to market forces, charged $1 for 3 options. I doled out on my Post-it pad. Mother took the most appointments. I'm feeling tired, she'd say, or I'm in a lot of pain. Such heaviness for such a small girl. I could almost put my arms around her. Never baffled, I played my father's game, listening patiently, numbering my child's advice in blue crayon, each prescription palpating the knife's edge of a calamity no counsel could ever reach, no child's gaze could ever meet. My better half is sitting right across from me, my husband Chad, and he and I watch a lot of horror movies. A lot, like really a lot of horror movies. We love them. And lately I've been trying to think about what, if anything, I've learned from all those hours. The horror. 1. There are 2 black actors, so one is about to die, you say, into your long neck microphone for what you know. The awful mathematics of films like these, the other is always the first to go. Here we are at our worst, culling people we can't know from our thin plots like weeds to make the rising action to build our greedy ascent. Typical, you mutter. You swig the beer and I swear it could be my own blood swimming. 2. These guts, these knife thrusts, these mutants exploding like supernovas from unsuspecting chests, it's all still here in high resolution, gray matter so gelatinous it throbs with thought, saliva so sticky our mouths flood with water. I've returned to childhood, cloaked in the basement's pall, gorged on film after unrated film because my mother thought unrated meant the same as safe. Did not know that no eyes, no ratings board stuffed with clergy and censors had ever seen the horror that lay within the black bricks of those old cassettes. There is no safety. That is horror. 3. Reveling in imagined superiority. You don't have enough bullets, you ass. We list wisdom. The camera will survive, but the cameraman will not. If you enter the spirit realm, make sure you have an exit strategy. The call is absolutely coming from inside the house. Why do we make them this way? These open-mouthed wailers, these we have to go backers, these summer camp slaughterers, because they are us, because they are not. The frames churn. 4. I promise if our dog won't come into the house, we'll sell it, you say. Insurance policy for our Technicolor doom. There's a reason the asking price is so low, you know? Pouring over and over the home invasions, the demonic toddlers drenched in their gore, their unbelievable trust, we won't make the same mistakes. Then the layoff, the stillborn, the poodle mangled by the road won't slice so swiftly. Or will it? Are there finally only endless panoramas of grief, kaleidoscopes muddied, pains gone dark at the fringe? 5. Now we know this much, at least. If you hear a noise coming from the wardrobe, run. If your wife tells you she's carrying the devil's spawn, believe her. Leave the feral children where you found them. When you exorcise evil, it has to go somewhere. We understand it all, yes? That when we bury our loved one under so many shovelfuls of soil, if he comes back, he will never be the same. His face, we might recognize its scar on the left nostril, its pockmark cratering the forehead like a test site, and yet that gleam in his eye. That's new. We wait. We see what he'll do. 6. The theater is all clamor. Blaring counsel, yelling for our protagonist to flee. Later, I will secure a free voucher because the seats erupted with strain, with worry, with popcorn and pain. But for now, our flower bag-clad intruder idles out of Liv Tyler's manicured reach. His chaos flits like a songbird. Her death hovers over her, wings blackened and preened. When they slowly drive the knife into her lover's side, she asks the foolish question, why were they doing this? Because you were home. Parrot with no pull string, idiot refrain again and again. How did she miss these lessons? They do it because they can, because they're already there, behind you, behind you, behind. I saw a really interesting video the other day of captive animals being released into the wild for the first time. They'd never been outside in their entire lives. They were from labs, from puppy mills, various sorts of cages, and it was a really sort of gorgeous video and a really generous liberation project. But I think that the voiceover that accompanied this video reached some really interesting and really faulty conclusions. Animals again. 1. A supercut of captives flickers over my cracked screen. On the last day of their sentence, matted chimps and rip-eared hounds, electroded hares, and slink-skinny leopards bound into their first green grass. They are animals again, their liberators crow. These men, too, making a blunder enormous as our sweaty planet teeming. Animals are animals in the bottom of our stomachs, chained to the fence, kicked in the ribs. Animals are animals when drowned in a sack, stuffed with our medicine, slathered with our lipstick, crushed in our powders, bent beneath our callous saddles, burnt with our brands, curled sleeping at our feet. Our terriers sniff the hands that pet them, hands that hum with the vibrato of pain and peace. 2. I was born into the proud lineage of Earth's most arrogant mammal, who devours her denizens with hot sauce and swallows the anguish all that hunger has cost for dessert. Fitting that it's a cat who purrs her velvet threat into Batman's unmasked human ear. You're all gonna wonder how you ever thought you could live so large and leave so little for the rest of us. We will be lonely here, naked bipeds, when we've eaten all our company, herded them into a rising sea. Can our cages swing open as theirs do? Our powder paws and peregrine's claws rising in our last jailed leap? The very word is the soul's breath. Each animus that creeps from the maw of its container blinks, hungers, wonders how to flee. Shivering on our cerulean marble, we could stalk forth uncertain animals again. This is my last poem. Thank you for listening. The United States of Juvenilia. Your man tells me that he wants to mow lawns every day, the sweet green stink clinging to his legs, which grip the sides of the ride-on, his unruly red stallion. A child with children yearning for that permanent dream, spring's humid haze embracing him eternally. But grow up we must. This adumbration scrubs the sky like a rough cloud. So he packs the hopeful green stuff into a pipe he kisses as if it were your own full lips. In another town, some ingenue opens a preschool for adults. Naps and songs smear the walls like the finger paint that stains their cheeks. Will we ever have had our fill of animal crackers, of insouciance, of sheep? Oh, this nation of babies, this throbbing globe of need, we infants, we shirkers, we dandelion pickers, we suckle at the television's warm screen. Our hero, Sheldon Cooper, tossing in his Star Wars sheets. Our heroine, Carrie Bradshaw, throws tantrums in tutus, marries a man who could be her own cruel father, a quiet creep. We verb maturity, adulting scars the fronts of manuals that tell us how to breathe. Tell me, sweet thing, is it so terrifying to dream not back into our blue depths, but into a future where our own hands stroke our hot cheeks? What glory awaits if we ran for office, for coffee, into each other's arms instead of into the sprinkler's cold scream? What chance, what infinity, what paradise or power? Hush now, go back to sleep. Thank you. You thought you'd had enough of me. All right. I'd like to introduce the last, but certainly not the least, reader of this evening, Sydney Thompson. Sydney is the author of Sideshow, which Forward Magazine awarded the Silver Award for Best Short Story Collection of 2006. His fiction, twice nominated for the Pushcart Prize, has appeared in such journals as the Carolina Quarterly, the Cortland Review, Dans le Macabre, Gray Sparrow Journal, Prick of the Spindle, the Southern Review, and Story South. He holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of Arkansas, and hell yeah, successfully defended his dissertation yesterday. His dissertation, a novel entitled Bass Reeves, was recently awarded second place for UNT's Inspiration Award. He currently lives in Fort Worth, where he teaches writing at Texas Christian University. Let's hear it for Sydney.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. I feel like I've been hiding a lifetime, so I'm really happy to see all of you again. All right, I'm going to read an excerpt from my dissertation, which is an historic novel, Bass Reeves. This excerpt needs a bit of a setup. His master, known as Master Reeves, has just given Bass to his son, George Reeves, who is about to go to war as a cavalry officer, and Bass Reeves will attend him as his body servant. Now, George Reeves insists that Bass call him no longer George Reeves, but Master Reeves, which is the same name that Bass used to refer to the previous master. So that might cause a little bit of confusion without a setup. So with that change of ownership, the new master has decided to go on a hunting trip with Bass as a way of sort of getting to know each other before they head to war. Hunters passed them by on the road. They spoke to Master Reeves but did not stop, and a stench of death trailed behind the muddied wagons piled with deer, hog, beaver, and bear, like a long rope that dragged the ground. Bass would have chosen to work for Master Reeves, the other Master Reeves, for all his life over anybody else in this world. He had finally allowed himself to think that all the way through. And if freed, he would have chosen to live close to the plantation, to see his family, but also to still see Master Reeves come and go, and even shoot with him if he wanted. But to be given away like a word to somebody, like a peach, on loan or not, what was the difference? Eventually, every time, whether heated up mad or sad, he had to change the subject to no subject at all, to the Morgan's shorter, softer stride, or to the sun blooming off the Boston mountains like an ox-eye daisy. If God could be a daisy, and why couldn't he? God saying to Bass, in his flowers speak, "Don't forget, I don't forget." Petals fell into the tree cover, and then they were there, under it, Master Reeves, and then Bass, at the brow of the White River, sparkling like ice, where Bass had always come to pitch camp with Master Reeves, the other Master Reeves. It'd be easier not to believe in God, believe Bass. Not to believe in God, he could pull Master Reeves off his saddle right here, right now, quick, and strangle him. Weight him down in the river with easy-as-you-please stones, then blaze his way northward for Kansas, shooting dead every white man who crossed eyes at him. Would be a whole lot easier than this fear in place of nothing. But wouldn't his mama and auntie and grandmammy and granddaddy be proud of him for the magic of keeping his fear buried deep and safe inside him like a tater? At the bank, in a lacy patch of white pussy toes, Master Reeves dismounted and stretched himself as the Morgan, blowing, almost purring at the tiny, fuzzy-headed blooms, nosed closer to the river for a drink. Bass walked his sorrel close, but not too close to Master Reeves, a little off into a tighter spot between Tupelos, and dismounted. "Boy, what are you up to?" Bass whipped his head in his direction, wondering what he could have done wrong. "Master, are you so fatigued by your own laziness that you think I'll stand by and let you nominate yourself master over me?" "No, sir, Master Reeves, I ain't tired," said Bass. "Not at all." Master Reeves took off his hat and wiped a kerchief across his forehead as he trod toward Bass, his boots sinking in softness. "Then why are you planning yourself upriver of me?" "This my usual place, sir." "Your usual place, is it? My father let you go north of him?" "Well, yes, sir. Here he did." Master Reeves smiled and balled the kerchief in his fist. "The chick that's in him pecks the shell." "Sir?" "Moby Dick? You hadn't read it yet?" He stared at Bass, then started to say more, but paused with his jaw lowered, which made his mustache stand out darker and thicker and sharper, the ends angled down, and together with the strip of hair growing from his bottom lip past his chin. Master Reeves appeared to have a spearhead mounted on his face, the tip of it pointing to his nose, as if to say he smelled the musk of everything, that he belonged to this forest. And then it vanished as he spoke. "Nigger, you know what I'm asking you. Don't play dumb with me." Bass feared maybe he was dumb. He believed if he said what was on his mind, he'd be answering a totally different question. "Are you declaring allegiance to the North by going upstream of me?" Oh, no, sir, master, said Bass. I just don't cotton to no spot so thick with stick. Bass pointed to the pussy toes, like stepping on spider webs. Master Reeves grinned. Bass, are you scared of spiders, a big nigger like you? No, sir, ain't scared of no spiders, just don't cotton to no stick. I reckon you don't cotton to cotton then. No, sir, don't much cotton to no cotton. A lot of work cotton, said Master Reeves. Don't mind work, master, said Bass. Don't mind work, huh? Then why are you lollygagging along, boy? Move your black ass downstream of me this very damn instant. Master Reeves, said Bass, rapidly nodding his head the way he had gotten in the habit of doing when the circuit preacher came out to the plantation and gave a Sunday service in the quarters. Only his eyes were open and aimed at those pussy toes up under Master Reeves's boots. Don't be begging me. Are you having a conniption? You want the whip? Master Reeves, Bass repeated, not meaning to. Master Reeves laughed but wasn't happy. I may have to give you back. You think that's what you want, but it ain't what you want, boy, I promise you. You won't go back pretty. Master Reeves, sir, said Bass, still nodding, praying God smelled his fear and felt it knotted up in his belly the way Bass felt it. He watched Master Reeves tuck his kerchief back in his pocket and set his hat back on his head. He watched him then open his coat as if he might have a whip tucked into his pants. But he didn't have anything of the kind, like he was showing Bass he had nothing, that there was nothing to fear, nigger, so go ahead. Like Master Reeves finally smelled his fear too, and was saying nothing to give him room to talk, as if he was waiting, praying too this would end, that they could go on back to the peaceful world of earlier. So Bass nudged himself to go on and step up to the words, to go on and speak. I think, sir, he finally heard himself say, I think I can recall Master Reeves, the other Master Reeves, your daddy, sir. Get on with it, for heaven's sake. I think I remember him saying it flowed backwards, the White River, sir, towards Northway, like the Nile do, like they was maybe the only two. Like the Nile? Master Reeves turned to the clear open space of the river and strode closer to it. Bass began to wonder what Master Reeves could have been thinking or seeing or even smelling after standing there for so long at the edge, his back to Bass, staring off at the wide road of silver water sliding slowly up. It's some world when a nigger ain't as free as an ant or a frog or a butterfly, who can all find their way north to the Tupelos to get away from the stick of pussy toes without having to explain why or risk being whipped or dragged or sold or given away or killed. That was what Bass wished Master Reeves was thinking or seeing or smelling. Yep, said Master Reeves, turning to face Bass with a face surprisingly at ease, more like his father's than his own. That's a beautiful river. I've been away far too long. Let's enjoy this respite, Bass. My father is a wise man. Let's learn to trust each other, you and me, and have a high time on the fat of the land. Then when we get to Texas, you need not ever say, I think this and I think that in front of the other slaves, or I will splay you open like a clam. Oh, you'll be bleeding like a pig, but you'll look like a fucking clam. If you have thoughts, I recommend you pretend you don't. Yes, sir, master, said Bass, suddenly flushed with exhaustion. He told himself to get used to this crazy man. He was crazy and always would be. You see, said Master Reeves, my slaves know about Ralph Waldo Emerson. You don't know about Ralph Waldo Emerson, do you, Bass? Bass shook his head and lowered his eyes as Master Reeves inched his way from the river. A Massachusetts preacher and philosopher, Bass, an abolitionist. You know what an abolitionist is, don't you, Bass? Bass nodded. So far as a man thinks, he is free. That's what he says. Let that sink in. So far as a man thinks, he is free. So just by thinking, Bass, you make yourself free. Now, I can't keep you from thinking, not completely, but I can damn sure slow it down, and if you go around bragging about it, I'll have to take issue with you. Understand? Understand, Master, said Bass. And you know what else Emerson says? No, sir. Something about ice? Ice? What the fuck? Master Reeves, the other Master Reeves, your daddy, he buys his ice, he told me, from Massachusetts. Master Reeves looked away and bared teeth as he lifted his top lip. No, you'll like this better than anything about ice, because it's about you, boy, about all slaves. He's an abolitionist, remember, so it's important what Emerson says, and he says nothing is more disgusting than the crowing about liberty by slaves, as most men are. He reached out and patted Bass on the arm, but hardly a hand, hardly any strength behind it, not the strength of God that Bass had behind his own. And something like that, which made no sense, could startle him. Most men are slaves because they have no thoughts, are helpless, which is why we thinking men put y'all to work, said Master Reeves. Well, you aren't helpless or thoughtless, or you'd be working a field, so that makes you freer than a lot of white men who work fields. That's a part of what he's saying. The other part is he wants you to stop crowing, boy. You don't need the North, and they're tired of you believing you need them, which means they're tired of helping too. You want liberty, or more liberty than what you have, then think more. He raised his hand up to Bass's head and with a fingertip drummed his temple, making Bass blink. Use your damn head more. This thing, he said, repeatedly, drumming. But by God, Bass, you better keep that shit to yourself. You do that, and I'll let you be free. My gift to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sydney. Let's start with just an enormous round of applause for all of our readers tonight. Fantastic. Thank you all again for coming. I just want to say I've really been blessed to be able to do this for the last 2 years with Jenny Mulberg, and I couldn't have asked for anything better to do with my time at UNT than to be involved with ALR, especially these last 2 years as part of the managing production team. It's just been really fantastic. So thank you all who helped out on the journal. Thank you for coming to these readings, for supporting our local community, our greatest asset. Yeah, you agree?
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. Thank you again to the White House for having us, and I hope this will not be the last time we're here at White House for the ALR graduate readings. So thank you all so much. You have a wonderful, wonderful night.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, really? Today? Okay.
She kept saying, let's go back, and I was like, no, I know where we're going. And then they ended up like at a little big fence that had a sign, like a Indian sign that said Wild Horse. And she was like, Paula, why don't you keep going? And she was like Googling Wild Horse. She was like, no, they look terrible. This is a bad idea. Oh, that's the shirt.
Oh, I just told you. Yeah. Thanks.
No, it's not Brent. No, I had class. There you go. Okay. Well, I missed pizza. Okay. Hanging out time. Somebody mentioned
It's horrible. These places, I mean, there are some and there's some beautiful
There's an open mic if anyone wants to read. Justin?
Yeah, so like they don't even know. And they're used to it. Yeah, and they're used to it. I don't think my father wants to be at one point. He said to me,
First, I thought
and I then the dark.
so like, yeah, I have to ask you.
This is right there.
How long is the day? Watch it.
All you gotta do is get here like half an hour early.
Good to see you. 2 days in a row. I feel like I've gotten a lot of Carl.
What can I say?
Yeah. So, do you work for 1 more year, or?
So it's taking on school, and then just defend my dissertation.
So you got a lot of meetings.
You know, with Mike wanted to stand, we're both so fantastic reasons. I felt really good.
Carl wants to sing, but he needs a little encouragement. So I'd say.
Where's your guitar?
How come you're not? If you want someone to sing, Bruce, why don't you? Well, this is a safe space for you to try out the
Yes. We just need to get Dr. Holdeman out here.
Yeah, Dr.
He'll sing for us.
Yeah.
It's so
No. This is not whether or not can or not. His ability. He is singing. Like, in the end, he is.
Yes, Aaron. What a good weekend. What kind of singing did you
I still have. There's nothing to scare emotional. And somebody once said,
I don't even check. Like,
so much classical music.
I could have wanted, but I'm not going to.
But part of the folk sound that I like.
Oh, I don't think I want to. That's my time. But I do want to.
Probably has to do especially with the seven.
Okay.
And also a little what's the one mode where it's mixed load mode, where that's the basically like the two parts of the major scale, and instead of having like whole half, what is it? Is it whole half, whole? It's half, but it's not mixed load. Yeah, right. But what it does is it makes the 5 sound like it's coming out. Yeah, the Beatles do that like all the time.
The thing that
so you can have like, you know, I like I do love this. I like the show.
Yeah. That started happening a lot. That's when you start making people popular.
Yeah.
Where it happens so much that it makes it really popular. These things that used to had to
So nice how
you hear local party they have this it's such a weird thing. I read it in our book. The only Harvard book I know that says this. So their rating is just so
insane. Been trying to sell it. I was gonna say maybe after you forced to
play it right out.
for like several years. So
So buy a house. That says a lot about culture.
Yeah.
A lot of what you learn is kind of like what we learn in poetry. The poem evolves a kind of personality. Right now, you suddenly switch harmonically back to that, to approach that.
Yeah.
So when Charlie Parker starts doing solos and he'll smash the clap.